when you want to run away from your record.
Let's get more questions from voters. This is Robert Tucker. He's a lawyer. He says he's still deciding between you and Senator Rubio. Robert, welcome.
Hey, Robert.
Hello, welcome back to Greenville.
Thank you.
From time to time, we see articles written in the paper or on television that you don't get along with some of the Republican senators, your colleagues in Washington. If you're going to have a problem with them, what are you going to say to them as president to get them on board so that we can get legislation passed?
It's a great question, Robert. Thank you for asking it. Let me focus on two levels. Let me, number one, explain why that is, and then number two, how we actually change the direction in Washington. The reason why that is simple. It's not that I speak with a lack of civility or respect. I mean, you've seen in this presidential campaign, as other people insult me, impugn my integrity, I don't respond in kind. I try very much, the Bible talks about if someone treats you unkindly, repay them with kindness. It's like heaping coals on top of their head. That has been the standard I've tried to follow. That's how I've approached it in the Senate. So I have not attacked or insulted my colleagues in the Senate, Democrat or Republican. Even if I disagree with them on the issues, I'll tell you why they say Ted is unlikable in Washington. Because I'm actually honoring the commitments that I made to the men and women who elected me. So, for example, on Planned Parenthood, I led the fight for us to use the budgetary power of Congress to stop giving $500 million to Planned Parenthood. What Republican leadership wanted to do is have a show vote, lose the show vote, and then fund all of Obama's agenda, including Planned Parenthood. And so what's unlikable is when you stand up and say, how about we do what we said we would do? Likewise, when I stood up and led the fight against Obamacare, they said that was unlikable. When I stood up and led the fight against the Rubio-Schumer amnesty bill, they said that was unlikable. You know why? Because all the money in Washington, all the lobbyists in Washington wanted amnesty. If you look at K Street, if you look at the special interest, if you look at Wall Street, amnesty they think is great. It's cheap labor. And so when you actually stand up, and by the way we won these fights is that I stood up and tried to shine a light on them, shine attention on them, and empower the American people. So, for example, amnesty, Rubio-Schumer amnesty passed the Senate. Every Democrat voted for it, and a whole bunch of establishment Republicans. And it was headed to the House to pass. House leadership, John Boehner, intended to take it up, pass it with all the Democrats and a handful of Republicans, roll over about 200 House Republicans. And I stood with Jeff Sessions and Steve King, and we took the case to the American people. And what happened is millions of American people rose up, lit up the phones to Congress and said, don't do this. And we defeated the Rubio-Schumer amnesty bill in the House. Now, in the world of Washington, that's considered unlikable. When Republican leadership, I wrote a book last year called A Time for Truth. The opening chapter is entitled Mendacity. It describes the inside story of what happened on the debt ceiling, where Republican leadership wanted to make it easier for Harry Reid to add trillions in debt to our country, and I objected to that. And the act of objecting, of honoring the promise I made to the men and women who elected me, engendered more animosity and unhappiness than anything I've done in my time in the Senate. Just this morning, Senator Jim DeMint, tremendously respected former senator here from South Carolina, was on a radio interview. He addressed this question. He said, listen, Ted is a friend. Anyone who says he's unlikable is being ridiculous. They said the same thing about me, Jim DeMint said, because Jim DeMint honored the commitments he made to the men and women of South Carolina, and Republican leadership hated Jim DeMint. Because, not that he spoke mean about them, but because he actually said, let's do what we said we would do. So let's take the second half of your question. How do we fix the problems? Because we actually need to fix them, not just talk about them. We need to change the direction of this country. A president has really three levers of presidential authority to change the direction of this country. Number one is executive power. That's been the one that Obama has abused so much. Now, the silver lining is everything done with executive power can be undone with executive power. That's why I pledged on day one to rescind every single illegal and unconstitutional executive action taken by Obama. It's why I pledged to instruct the Department of Justice to open an investigation into Planned Parenthood and prosecute any and all criminal violations. It's why I pledged to end persecution of religious liberty in the executive branch. It's also why I pledged to instruct the Department of Education on day one that Common Core ends today. Using legitimate executive power, you can end many of the abuses of Obama if you just have a president willing to use that power. The second avenue of executive power to change the direction of this country is foreign policy. It's why I pledged on day one to rip to shreds this catastrophic Iranian nuclear deal. And on day one to begin the process of moving the American embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Both of those on foreign policy the president can do immediately, and it's worth remembering that this same nation, Iran, released our hostages the day that Ronald Reagan was sworn in. And then the third avenue to change the direction of the country is legislation. Now, legislation is not easy with this broken Congress. I'm running on two big legislative initiatives. Number one, repealing every word of Obamacare. And number two, adopting a simple flat tax and abolishing the IRS. Now, neither one of those are easy. I'm not remotely naive or Pollyannish. Could I get those done in this Congress? No. But think about the last time we beat the Washington cartel. It was 1980. It was the Reagan Revolution. Remember, Reagan in '76 primaried Gerald Ford. You want to make Republican leadership loathe you, come within an inch of beating the incumbent Republican president in a primary. You think they dislike me? They hated Reagan with the heat of 1,000 white-hot suns. He was unlikable. And yet, what did Reagan do in '77, '78, '79? He didn't fly to Washington, sit down with the old bulls, and say, come on, guys, let's stand for something. He knew that wouldn't work. Instead, he took the case to the people. He built a grassroots army. The Reagan Revolution swept in. And when you go to the people, it transformed the incentives. Today, everyone's a Reagan Republican. You cannot find a Republican who will not swear that Ronald Reagan is tattooed somewhere on their body. But the reason is he took the case to the people and he changed the incentives. How do we abolish Obamacare, repeal Obamacare, and adopt a flat tax? We make the election a referendum so we come out of November 2016 with a mandate from the people. And that's exactly what I intend to do.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.